great thing you can always say is performance pressure, so that's definitely performance pressure. Thank you very much for the invite of being here. It's such a privilege. It's such a fantastic vibe. I want to present some stuff if I can find how this works. My friend here will do it. That's right. There I've got. That's beautiful. A few people yesterday talked about context, and I think context is really important. Like, who am I and how dare I stand up here and tell you to brace yourself? Well, I didn't say that. You said that. But let me tell you a little bit, and I think it's important that you know where I come from. I was just saying to Jackie during the break is that I went to university. I was a mature age student because I was a carpenter. I left school quite young, did screwing and stuff like that as a carpenter, and went on to teach screwing later. But one of the things in between that was about trying to find a way to understand people. I have a number of people with disability in my family. Won't go into lots of those, but in terms of trying to understand, I'm an existential psychotherapist, which means I'm interested in meaning. I'm really interested in meaning, not the problem, but what's behind that. The person. What's their meaning? What are they doing? But I got that in quite a strange way because being a carpenter, it's very grounding. It's about we build things. We actually do even things like scaffolding. We do amazing things, and these words have come in to our language now. We talked just, or we heard about Malcolm just chatting about man. As a man working there as sexology, have a guess what most people think that I do. I have the best sex life. My partner's down the back, you can ask her later. She's shaking her head. But anyway, I've come from a background of a whole range of things, and I feel very privileged. I've had a wonderful family background. I've had a whole range of people with diversity in their background. And I was confronted with the stigma of doing something like psychology. And put your hand up if you've done Psychology 101. It's very boring. 202 is pretty bad, 303 is even worse, but sexology, wow. Right? Not part of psychology, taught separately. What do I do now? I'm in private practice. I worked for Disability Services Commission for a number of years. In fact, I was employed by the Authority of Intellectually Handicapped Persons when we were authority. Apparently we knew everything, and we didn't. But in 1987, we passed through Parliament at 2 o'clock in the morning the first policy on the rights of people with an intellectual disability around sexuality and relationships in the world. That happened in Western Australia. I was saying to Jackie, where did it come from? Well, it didn't come from politicians saying, oh, maybe we should talk about sex. I'm not doing a strip, I'm just taking a picture. I need to be so careful. It came from families. It came from carers, support workers saying, we don't know what to do. This is what we're doing, and we're so worried that we're doing the wrong thing because there's nothing. Well, there was so much. It's just that no one had spent time to put it all together and say, well, actually, these are the rights of people. They're the rights of parents. They're the rights of support staff. And it came from a bottom-up approach. When you talk about sex, there's lots of puns, but a bottom-up approach, right, in terms of the raw face of people with disability and people with very challenging behaviours. You may not know that the first person to die of HIV in Australia was a person with intellectual disability in this state. That's why the policy got through. I'd like to say it's around human rights, and it was, right? But it was also a reactive issue about what are we doing? We have to teach about safe sex, we have to teach about condoms. Well, sexuality is much more than that. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Sexuality is a whole range of different things. It's not just about what we do with our genitals. If you want pornography, I'm sorry I don't have it, but, well, I do, but that's later if you want first. I need to talk to you a little bit about individuality. We're going to talk very general about people with disability, specific examples about people who have challenging behaviours, and also families, parents, carers who have challenging behaviours themselves. We forget this. We forget it. As a parent, you know that time and time again you go, don't bloody do it, you do it again, and you're not getting this, you're not going to the barbecue, you're not seeing your friend. Oh shit, I wanted to go to the barbecue. Oh. We've got that concept of this reactive issue, and we're actually putting ourselves down because it actually limits our whole family. We have another issue, is that not everyone here is in a family situation themselves with a partner, children, etc. There are some of you with very young children, there's some with very old children. In my private practice, I deal currently with someone who's 3, and my oldest client has been 91. Right? And at the moment, it's 87. I'd love to say to you it's all about enhancement of sexuality, about positiveness, etc. But the 3-year-old's there because of sexual abuse. And she has a disability. I'm not here to talk to you about sexual abuse. That's another sort of area. But when we know about the stats and we know about what's happening, sexual abuse is incredibly high with people with disabilities. Incredibly high. And that's good statistics. That's not just about, have you ever been touched on the breast in a way that you didn't like it? How many women here have been on public transport and you're moving around and someone's banging into your boob? That's not sexual assault. Right? So good research is saying that people with a disability have 5 times more chance of being sexually assaulted. Right? That's a conservative estimate. So we know that there's a whole range of things. So that's why we teach about sexuality. All people are unique. It's a very throwaway line, but it's so true. We can use categories and labels, measurements of physical capacity, adaptive behaviours, IQ, EQ. We can do all sorts of stuff, but all it does is provide a framework to help us understand some issues for people. It's not them. Right? I'm going bald. If you think that that's all I am is a bald man, right, come and talk to me later. Means you're very sexy. See, look at us. High testosterone levels. All the men will be shaving. Let me talk a little bit more about something which is very important. This is for you. This is for the listeners. Expression of sensuality and sexuality often are the lowest priorities considered important with a person with a disability. You need to be aware of your own triggers, though. There'll be people in this room who found themselves around the area of sexuality and felt very abused by it. You need to be looking after yourself. We call that self-care. We need to do that with every behaviour. We need to do that with every conference, is to look at self-care, and especially around the area of sexuality. I've started some presentations because things like computers don't work, and I was doing an Active Foundation conference some years ago, and I won't say very much about Active at the time, but quite conservative. And it was like, Gareth, when you're up, please don't swear, don't mention any political things, and whatever you do, just be careful how you're talking about sex. That's a little bit hard. Nothing worked. PowerPoint went down, everything went down, microphone went down. So as someone who's been doing education for a long time, I stepped sideways and I said, what would you like to talk about? And the first question, a woman at the front said, my grandchild now is 19 years of age and he wanks a lot. And I'm just wondering, are you allowed to actually have people come to your house, like prostitutes, and just help him learn how to wank? The conference organiser at the time almost fell off the stage. See, I don't know what level you're at, but one of the things I said to Jackie and the organisers, I'm very happy to talk about sexuality, but I do that for 4 days sometimes in conferences, all sorts of stuff. And I don't want to workshop you out, but I can tell you now, you all have different areas of comfort with sexuality. So just show of hands. Put your hand up if you learnt about sexuality in school. Keep your hand up if they taught you how to do a blowjob. So this is a problem, men. We have a huge problem here. See, we talk around sexuality as if it's so easy to justify. Oh, this is what it's about, this is what it's about. But it's far more than that. Some of you will be thinking about sensual and sexual desires, about your own thoughts. I don't tend to read this. I go off on my own track, so you read it if you want to. Right? Some of you will be thinking, why do I want to deal with this now? There are so many things going on with my son or daughter. I'm trying in my own life to be very gender neutral. Right? So if I say sort of child, boy, girl, or trans, it just means that there are a number of people now. There's a 3,000% increase of people who don't have male or female, not genitalia, but chromosomes. If you don't know about this, go and Google it. Right? People who are born intersex, you can't biologically determine what they are. So that's what I'm going to say in terms of trans, just to be a bit more inclusive. But some of you might be thinking, well, I don't get it. Right? Because of the challenging behaviours of my son, what we're going to talk about sex, well, I haven't had a good screw for a few weeks. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because it's about how many of you have time to be intimate. The world is incredibly stressful when you have a child with a disability and they're displaying challenging behaviours where you believe it's absolutely your 100% responsibility to get in there and deal with it, right? Solve the problem. Some research is coming out now, and I'm very interested. I've been an academic for a lot of years as well, which is talking about the show of affection with parents is probably one of the most important things, to have intimate and sensual contact with your sons and daughters. Isn't that simple? Well, not if you hate your spouse. Not if it's like, hi honey, how you going, bastard? Pretty good, bitch, how you going? What are we displaying by this? Well, that's very explicit, but the subtleties are what people with disabilities pick up more sometimes than the explicit. They're picking up the energies, they're picking up about how we feel about each other, and they pick up about our frustration. So if we're sexually frustrated, intimately frustrated, guess what our child is picking up? So look after yourself. I just said to Jackie, I had 55 slides and I've cut it down and I'm probably still not going to get it through, but we're putting this up somewhere. Right, so they'll be available if I don't get through. What is sexuality? Sexuality is an all-encompassing state of being where through biological, psychological, moral and societal influences we develop a self-concept from which we express ourselves. We can argue, debate this for the next 3 days, and I can tell you it'll come around similar. Right? It's just a definition. Well, why is sexuality important? We just heard a wonderful presentation before mine about neurosciences. We are studying so much now in neurosciences and for people generally. We have things like functional MRIs. A dear friend of mine called Beverly Whipple, who discovered the G-spot, decided after many, many years where psychiatrists said, well, a woman who is quadriplegic cannot have an orgasm. It's called a fantasy orgasm. It doesn't really actually happen. Have you heard about this? Because you can't feel anything. If you can't feel anything, well, obviously you can't have an orgasm. So she did a study where she got a functional MRI and put people on a functional MRI and they can think themselves to orgasm. If any of the women want that study, it's available later. You can right? We are only just breaking ground now. I used to see a guy with spinal injury who could feel different things in his body. If he had something on his seat about the size of a 20-cent piece, he could feel it. Yet he could get a knife and put it into his buttocks and wouldn't feel it. We're only just learning the neuroscience about pleasure. But I can tell you now, we are pleasure seeking. That's what we do. We are trying to seek pleasure continually. It can be pleasure in control, finances, all sorts of stuff, less stress, but we are trying to seek pleasure. So if we look at people in doing that, a lot of their behaviours are around trying to seek pleasure. But you say, how can my daughter be wanting pleasure? She's tearing her hair out. Because she doesn't know how to do it. Why is it important? Well, very quickly, and we've said it before, and a number of people are saying it earlier today, it's not the behaviour. It's what the behaviour means. It's underlying about the person. That's what we need to be looking at. I want to show you this if it works, and some of you would have seen it. I'm not even going to introduce it apart from saying this man who you will see is lying down in the bed. It is explicit. You will see, I think, two breasts, one nipple, and you'll see some hand action, but you don't see any genitals. If you don't want to see, just close your eyes. Okay? It's from a film called The Sessions with Helen Hunt. This man has polio, and he was in an iron lung, and before he actually passed away, he did get married, had a lovely life with a partner. But this is him learning about his body. He has never been with a woman. He has never touched another individual, and no one has ever touched him in a non-clinical way.
I understand you'd like me to hear your confession?
Yes, I would. Not exactly a confession. I haven't yet done the deed.
I'm here for you, Mark.
Is it possible for me to know a woman in the biblical sense?
Are we talking about sexual intercourse?
I think so.
Outside marriage?
My penis speaks to me, Father Brendan. This therapist suggested I could work with a sex surrogate who would be sensitive to my unusual needs.
In my heart, I feel like he'll give you a free pass on this one. Go for it.
Yeah, maybe. Yes, it's good.
Hi, Mark O'Brien.
Your money's on the desk over there.
Yes, it is.
That was the wrong way to start off.
It really was. Shall we start again?
Please, you start.
I'm not a prostitute. You don't have to pay me up front. And there's a limit to the number of sessions we can have. The limit is 6. Shall we get undressed?
Sure.
First session. He was extremely nervous.
Let's forget about it.
Mark, do you want to see this woman or not?
No.
Well, it's too late.
What floor?
18th floor.
What kind of therapist is she?
She's a sex therapist. Today they're working on simultaneous orgasm.
What's that?
You're going to start to listen to signals from your body. That way you'll be able to have some control.
Oh, God.
I understand even among non-believers, the most common expression of sexual ecstasy is, "Oh, God."
Picture yourself as a 6-year-old boy. Do you blame him for getting polio?
What is she like, Cheryl?
She's the most wonderful person on the planet.
I don't usually meet with clients outside of work.
We don't have to do much talking. I just want people to say, hey, who's that gimp with that beautiful blonde? What happens when people become attached to each other? Maybe this is a bad idea.
I think you've done a great thing.
She adores me, and I can get pretty kinky. Am I sharing too much, Father?
Go on.
How many of you have seen that film? How many of you have seen it? It's worthwhile. It's riveting in terms of the whole film. It's a true story written by this guy as well. There's another one which is called Scarlet Road, which I highly recommend, which is an Australian production as well. In the United States, in Canada, in Australia, we tend to call these sorts of people who are coming in sex surrogates. There's a movement which I'm part of trying to call them facilitated sexual activity people rather than a surrogate to sex, because there's a whole range of things. What I like about that, the communication between these two people, yes, he's highly verbal, he's highly articulate, but she is attempting to find out about him. Please tell me, right? Don't tolerate stuff, please tell me. That's our job. That's our job, to find the person. That's our job, to find what they're wanting, whether it's a touch on their hair. Right? There are some people who love getting their hair touched. I used to when I had hair, right? But part of it still is about, there's a head massage. Some of you would have known a place called Purton many years ago, which is a training institute for people with intellectual disability, and we also knew with a number of people with mental health issues. We introduced massage, and massage, which was just upper body massage, and challenging behaviours reduced and reduced and reduced. In terms of collecting data, if I was to say 300%, continually reduced with people. To the extent where staff started to say, it looks like a number of the residents want to massage each other, what do you think? So we taught them. It didn't lead to rampant orgies, right? It didn't lead to pregnancies, it didn't lead to all this. It was just the intimate and sensual, which people had missed out on pretty much all of their lives, because they were instituted. They were put into places where that wasn't allowed even. And yet when I was employed, people were being allowed to drag people into their bedroom because we didn't understand consent. And I'll chat a little bit about that if we get time. Why discuss and address sexuality? Well, this is my favourite comic. I've been showing this for 30 years now, so if you can't read it, there's a small boy on top of a girl's head, and he says, okay, we took off our clothes, I got on top of you, how long till it starts to feel good? And she says, well, I don't know, but I've got a headache already. It's very sexist in many ways, and it sort of continues the myths. The reason that we teach around sexuality in any shape and form, because it helps people understand. It is as simple as that. Education in some parts of Europe now has started in primary school. There is a big debate in Australia, when should sexuality and relationship education start? It starts when you are in the labour ward and you've just given birth. That's when it's starting. Right? We don't normally, I love having newborn childs in my arms and you sort of stroke the hair. Usually go, more hair than me, look at the little digits. We don't normally go, oh, look at the penis, that's really big, right? See, we're already starting to do the social norms. I was in a community which I'm a pseudo-elder at, in a particular part of Western Australia, and it's desert. It takes about 8 hours to get there. And I'd gone up with a child protection worker who was dressed in white. Anyone who knows the Northwest, you don't wear white. Gets out of the car, she's dusting herself off. She turned red, which was very nice, in terms of... And an elder there who knew me very well came up and in his indigenous tongue said hello, and I know enough to say hello back, introduced her. And a young boy raced up then around sort of the bus, past the boad tree and came up, and he's got new stubbies on. Brand new little stubby shorts, right? Because they don't wear anything normally, but he's put them on. Why has he put them on? In respect that there's a child protection worker and this funny psychologist coming up to see the sort of community. And all of a sudden, this particular elder, I'll just call him Ed, said something in his indigenous tongue, and the little boy just went, oh, all right, and dropped his hands. Now, why would that be? So, of course, I went, oh, wow, he must be one of your grandchildren. And he said, my great-great-grandchild. Right? See, when I've been out there, I've done naked family therapy around a boab tree with groups of people. If that's what you need to do, go and do it. Make sense? These are desert dwellers who are sitting there putting sun cream over me going, yes, you're very white. Yeah, and I forgot to wear jocks today. That's all right. You know, this is stuff which we have to look at. How do we get messages across? Well, we need to look at the family values, the traditional values. There are some of you here now who might be a bit concerned because I've used the word wank, right? And I appreciate that and respect that. But language and how we use it, even though we have someone who we're looking after, caring for, who may not have language, is so important because they can still hear it. I've had someone recently say, but if they're deaf, they won't be able to hear it. Right? Really? Right? We pick up a whole range of energies when we use language as well. Basic issues. Healthy concepts about sexuality and relationships provide a strong self-esteem, confidence in self and others. All people in some form are in a relationship. Not all people want to be or are able to make strong, deep, lasting relationships and friendships. Not all people will have the skills or understanding about maintaining friendships. Relationships are complex. Relationships can be wonderful. Not all people want to be sexually active. Not all people can give consent to be sexually active. I really need to clarify this. Consent is one of those things about being with someone else, having someone do something with you. You don't have to give consent or have the capacity to give consent if you wish to have self-pleasure. Make sense? In terms of if you wish to masturbate, and I've had families ring up, I've had people from agencies ring up, you know, we have to stop this guy from masturbating. Recently I talked to a woman who'd been strapping her son's arms up to a wheelchair with Velcro. She said, best thing ever introduced. I said, how long have you been doing that for? She said, 25 years. But the fact that she was prepared to tell me in a session, I feel privileged. Because then I can break it down and talk about alternatives. Make sense? It's a horrible thing to think of, etc., but it's a mindfulness about staying in that moment and saying, thank you for chatting about that. It sounds like you've come in now because, yes, you've got cancer, you're worried about your own illness, and you're worried about your son. Let's talk about that. I'm going to skip through some of these because I think I'll just be chatting about. These are some really basic things which most people understand. One of the most important concepts for people to learn is about the concept of public and private. And I think we were chatting before about there's a dilemma sometimes about society which doesn't want people even salivating on the side. That's disgusting. You know, why are they at McDonald's? They're salivating. Oh my goodness, he's got a beard and he's got tomato sauce in it. Right? Get a life. So that there are certain things which we have to start to accept because we are so diverse in who we are. But someone masturbating at McDonald's, someone touching a young child at McDonald's is wrong. So there are certain challenging behaviours that we have to start to say, no, we need to deal with this. But not under restrictive practices about, we won't take you to McDonald's if you do this, right? There are other ways of doing it. Let me ask you, I do a lot of training, but I just want to do a problem-solving thing with you. This is just for the women. You're at McDonald's, right? You've got a beautiful white skirt on, and you get up and you've started your period. And your friend tells you, oh, you've got some blood on your skirt. Just for the women here, what do you do? example? Sit down? No, you have to leave. Come on. We'll tie a jump around it. Very good, right? I conduct a lot of groups. My private practice now is probably about 50% of people engaging with people with disabilities and people with disabilities themselves. So I do a lot of work outside the disability field. But I love running groups with a mixture of people. And we were recently in a school with 14-year-olds and we asked that question. Right? And a girl with autism said, oh, well, you can go over and get the ketchup things and you could cut the ketchup things. I can't tear them off. My dad usually does that. But you could cut them. You could ask for a scissor, and you could put them all over your skirt, and then it looks as if it's like a polka dot sort of skirt. All the girls in this group who have never laughed with this girl are laughing. Not at her. They're going, that's so cool, right? That's really clever. It's a basic problem-solving skill. We need to get into some really basic ways of thinking. Because guess what? These things happen. For the men in the group, you've got an erection. I haven't. Well, right? You've got a spontaneous erection that happens, right? You've got to give away male secrets now. What do you do with it? Anyone says masturbate, sorry, you need to go. Any of you done teacher training or presenting training? If all the women now, that's why podiums are good, were looking at my zip, right? Or the men were, I'd be thinking, oh, my zip's undone. So all I need to do is to go, oh, that point over there, so I've checked. Right? Men, boys get spontaneous erections. And the problem is that often we call it masturbation. They touch 3 or 4 times at school. Oh, he's jerking off underneath the table. We need a special EA to come in. In fact, we probably need a special classroom so we can go into because we can't tolerate that behaviour. How did you know he's doing that? Oh, there's 3 EAs. We're all looking at him 24/7. For the majority of men, they work out ways of doing it. I work with young guys who don't know. Right? And they put their hands down their tracksuit pants if they don't have it tied up, and they sort of alter themselves. And they do it in a very public way, so not a private way. So we just need to teach about public and private. One of the things about sexual expression, one of the aspects of that short video which I just showed you then, is that there's a lot of sensuality in it. Did you feel that? It's not pornography. It's about someone being with another person. How many of you like to hold hands? How many of you would like to hold hands more with people? Right? Look at the room. Half the room's got their hands up. We live in a society which is becoming so tactile phobic that I work with men who have 3-year-old children, boys and girls, and they're saying, Gareth, I wouldn't put them on my lap. You know what it's like when you're in the community. People look at you. They're so worried about what the community is thinking of them. So for the men here, let's have a challenge. Let's do the stuff which we do really well about safety. I'm well aware of the time, and I'm running out of time. It's only because you don't know how many slides I've got. Protective behaviours. I just want to get to these, because then I can talk about some stuff. Oh, it's got sound. All people are sexual beings. We begin to form relationships and have physical and psychological needs and desires from the time we are born. What are some of the nurturing, sensual things that we have when we're born? What are our needs? Touch, right? Science proves that, right? Is breastfeeding good? Absolutely essential if you can do it. If you can't do it, don't feel guilt and shame about it, right? Sometimes some people can't do it. We need to actually acknowledge that. Very, very important. But lying down, if you can't breastfeed, have the child close to you, all this stuff. When does that stop? You must all know this. You've dealt with it. When does nudity stop in the household? In ours, it hasn't yet, but that's all right. See, people ask this. It's like, oh, my 16-year-old's walking from the bathroom now to his bedroom, and it's like, I don't know what to do, but he's got a what's the word? I think it's called an erection. I don't know what to do. Could you buy him a dressing gown? Oh, that's a good idea. Could you just explain to him that because his grandmother's there or there's someone else there that maybe it's not private now, maybe he could learn that. Have you tried that? Oh, no, we were just so worried about that hard thing. See, the fear. The fear stops people from problem solving with any other behaviour. It's just simply going through the motions and looking about what will help. Oh, sorry about the sound. I'm not sure how to turn it down. And these needs and desires change over time. And we have an elderly population. How many of you know people who are in their 90s? What are their sensual needs? Very much the same. Touch, closeness, having someone to listen to them, trying to work out their communication. I'm doing work now in dementia wards because it's such a big issue. I'm fascinated that one of the major drugs which seems to be helping dementia is LSD or marijuana. Right? It's fascinating in terms of where things could be going. Right? I worked with a guy just recently and we were doing some brain training. He's a young guy with autism. I didn't realise, because it's only my second session, that he doesn't actually string words together very well grammatically for communication. We did 20 minutes of some music therapy, which I do. He goes outside, he's talking to his mum. His mum comes in and knocks on the door, interrupts the session and said, I don't know what you did, but he's talking to me. I said, but he talks to you all the time. I said, no, he's talking to me. He's talking to me in sentences. It's not miracle work by me. We've just triggered something in terms of brain training that all of a sudden something's happening. But don't sit there believing that that's going to happen for everyone. See, that's what we do. We go, oh, there's another magical cure, I can solve this. No, it's going to work for some people, not others. The developing sexuality of an individual is continually and inevitably influenced by daily contact with people of all ages. Do we know how to turn it down? If it doesn't bother you, keeps you awake, I'll leave it. Especially with the same and different gender interactions, relations, peers, family, other primary caregivers. Spiritual influences, very important. Oh, you're good, thank you. That little mute button, could have done. Myths and the media. The media is responsible for some of the biggest sexual myths out. Body type, acceptance, acknowledgement about who you are, it is a huge problem. So use it. Sit, and if you've got a son or a daughter, trans child who is watching Home and Away, sit and watch it with them. Have a story about what's going on. Don't just let them go off to fantasy land. Have a story. Learn the characters. Find out what's going on. I have someone at the moment that I'm seeing who's transgender and wants to be, I'm trying to think of the woman's name, from X-Men. People know the one who eventually, who does X-Men? Is anyone into X-Men? Storm or one of them. Who's the one who eventually goes off and blows everything up? Someone knows. Anyway, one of the, and wants to be this person. The family don't even know about X-Men. So the first thing was, sit and watch the shows with them. Learn about what they're trying to communicate. Didn't work. That's right. Sensitive and appropriate human relations and sexuality education can be a positive force in promoting physical, mental and social health. It has to be geared at different levels of learning: affective, cognitive, spiritual, cultural and operative. Right? If you're dealing with someone with a cognitive deficit, why try cognitive cues to teach? Right? Look at other things. Look at behavioural cues. Look at learning issues about cues, picking up different cues. Jackie was saying today about taking some time for Eli to learn one symbol about pain. It's worth it though, isn't it? Right? How many of you speak Makaton? A couple of you? Show me the sign for erection. Some years ago there was no sign for erection. Right? Now we have this flaccid, that erection, that condom. We learnt it from people who use Makaton. Make sense? It's talking to the people who have the street language to learn what they're needing. How do we actually explain stuff? What is it for vulva, labia? We don't have one currently. Right? Isn't it strange? We don't have one in Makaton. Right? One of them is this symbol, right? Looking as if it's this thing. So we need to do a lot of stuff in terms of appropriate relationship education and sexuality education. Human relations sexuality education can be formal or informal. Everyone receives this education in one way or another, and we are all educators. Every time that you are interacting with an individual, you are either confirming stereotypes or challenging stereotypes. I occasionally come along to seminars like this in a beautiful ball gown just to see people's reactions. Because will you listen to me in the same way? Make sense? I did a presentation one time with a group of psychologists. I don't think anyone had a degree less than sort of doctorate, and most of them were professors. and I wore a skirt in with my hairy legs, and they were so uncomfortable. And I said, would it help if I shaved my beard off? And someone yelled out, but why are you doing this? I said, because I want you to think. It's as simple as that. Not all education is factual, not all of it is positive or appropriate, accessible or understandable to all people. And we need to realise that. We need to get something and work out how the person needs it explained and to do it. The family is the primary person in providing formal and incidental relationship and sexuality education. It's a big thing, isn't it? Who taught you? It's such an issue. We dump this sort of stuff. Oh, your parents now, you'll have to do it. And then specialists come along and go, it's easy. Here's a book. Right? Conferences like this bring people together. I work with families and I have learnt so much off families. Right? I am probably a wonderful CBT therapist. Right? I hate using it, yet I'm very good at it. Because I'm more interested about the person. Right? CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy, looking at the antecedents, etc. Right? I'm not interested in the consequences or normality and now you can go on a bus. Right? I'm interested about, does the person want to be on a bus? How do they deal with the stimulation of 40 other people on a bus? That's what I'm interested in. Principle 6, and I know we're going to get gong soon, very quickly. Sexuality education should be given in the context of relationships. This is why it's so good to have the relationship segment before that. How it impacts on self. The longest relationship you will ever have is with who? Yourself. So you need to get to know yourself. I'm going to race through that. Formal education and counselling in these developmental areas. And I mean counselling from the point of view of all providing counsel. Right? Not clinical, psychologist, social worker. It includes all those, but people provide counsel to other people, advice, support, etc. All of those in developmental areas of human relations and sexuality has to be planned and implemented with careful attention to developmental needs, appropriateness to community settings and values, and respect for individual differences. There are some parents here who will have girls, young women, as their child, and they'll be looking at things like sterilisation. It's a fact. You're worried, you'll be thinking of that. A review was done in the late 80s and looked at what was happening in the 1960s, the 1970s, and the majority of people with an IQ which was just a moderate to mild IQ or to severe were having a hysterectomy before age 13. And that was in Western Australia. That has major consequences for a child in terms of development. Go and talk to people. If you are thinking and considering these things, go and talk. I'm one of the people in the state who makes some decisions or put up reports making some of those decisions. Go and talk to people. It's a really, really worthwhile. We have technology now which reduces the need for surgery, right, and produces similar aspects while you're dealing with challenging behaviours. So think it through. I just put down it's probably one of the most difficult. I had said by the gong I would finish and actually ask a question, as in to yourselves. And my question to you was about the fact that when we get up and speak, people have questions in the group. And we've got 2 minutes maybe? Has anyone got some questions? Because what I want you to do is chat and show people that it's okay to ask questions around sexuality, around challenging behaviours. Have you got a question? Please.
And it might be a bit inappropriate, but it's a real problem I've got. My son was at school and there was an incident that happened on him from another child where he pulled his pants down and put his fingers in my son's bum. But he's tending to do that now. Like he wants to grab everyone's bum and we don't know how to overcome that.
Okay, so part of it, and just to generalise it rather than your son, because that sort of helps, and I won't know your son until we talk a bit more and maybe even meet him, but part of it's trying to look at, well, why do people repeat a behaviour that could actually have been painful? It's an experience of someone touching him. It's an experience of not supposed to be touching the bottom on all that sort of stereotypical stuff we have. And people will repeat things because it caused some level of attention. So we go around repeating an act. Why is it that some women and men leave one abusive relationship and go into another abusive relationship? Because they know it. Right? It's not that it's part of your DNA. We know it and we think we can do a better job. So often the behaviour is about, I'm trying to find out what's appropriate. I'm trying to find out the best way to interact with someone. But if you want to get attention from another 8 or 9-year-old, stick your fingers in their bum. You'll have lots of attention. right? I'm not suggesting that, please, on the video, right? But that makes some sense. But to learn about another way, right? But we have schools now, and I'm not here knocking schools, we have schools now which will stop children in primary school rubbing each other's arms, which I believe is counteractive to what we're trying to do. Right? Are you allowed to brush your hair in class? No. Right? So someone giving you a head massage, how much chance have you got? Right? I'm part of a research model at the moment with one of my students, because I still do some supervision, where she's introducing massage in primary schools. Only 2 primary schools in the state were prepared to actually do it. Everyone's fearful. So I'm not sure if that helps. I didn't want to talk about it a lot, but it's about ask these questions, right? Put a question up there. I was just talking before. If you want to, we'll try to get them on Facebook, and I'll answer some of them, right? Just giving a few little lines, etc. I'd really like to do it. We've got time for one more. I haven't been gonged yet. Please.
My son's 11, coming on 12, and wants to look at naked women. I don't know where to find the appropriate material for him to do that. I don't want to stereotype him into a certain woman.
Mm-hmm.
I want to explain to him that the human body is of all genders.
Yep.
So where do I obtain that material?
There are organisations, so Sexual and Reproductive Health Western Australia, so the old family planning, People First, Seeker. I have resources. It used to be so easy to go onto the internet and get a variety of things. It is so hard to go on the internet now and even find a chart of a 2-year-old to an 80-year-old all naked, and it's all the fear about, if you see a child, you're going to go out there and tell you can get them. You can, male or female? Sorry.
My son's male.
Yep, sorry, it makes sense, right? Right? Why I mention it, so the primary thing is to learn about your own body, but while you're collecting stuff, it's learning about this is me as a boy, this is a girl growing up, right? And then about looking at images. It's such a big issue for people. There are massive amounts of images. If you type in bestiality into Google, you will see 1,000 free images of bestiality, even on a filter system, because you just press images, right? So in terms of what's available out there, kids need to have something which is appropriate. There's some research talking about over 80% of 9-year-olds have seen hardcore pornography already. And it's with smartphones you can do it and say, look at this. I'm aware you're going to gong me, so I need to finish. But please, all these questions, and I really mean this with every topic which has gone on, put them up there, because if we can try to get them on Facebook, I would be very happy, as I'm sure other people will be, just to give a small answer about stuff. I was saying before, and Jackie suggested I push it back on them, if you want more of this stuff, please ask the organisers, right? Ask them for what you want. Be really clear. Some of you have got young kids, etc. There's not just myself. There are many people who do this work, and we'd love to do it. Thank you very much for having me.